It could be just a man entering the church, but he is carrying a whole giant religion with him, Islam. And this church is Christian. Is this the moment when Prince Mohammed bin Salman would make a statement against religion? But what he has done is far more impressive and has turned the world upside down. Christianity and Islam were once one, but that was a long time ago. Both religions come from the same root, or rather the same tree, the monotheistic tradition of Abraham, and share many aspects, such as important figures like Abraham, Moses, and even Jesus. But where did the split occur? Understanding this will give us a deeper understanding of what it means for the prince to enter Egypt. As is well known, Christianity arose in Judea in the 1st century, centered around the figure of Jesus of Nazareth, whom Christians believe to be the Son of God and the Saviour of mankind. Islam, on the other hand, was born at least 6 centuries later, in the 7th century, on the Arabian Peninsula. Founded by the Prophet Muhammad, Muslims believe that Jesus was merely a prophet, never the Son of God, reject the Trinity, and establish the Quran as their sacred text, emphasizing the oneness of God, Tawheed. But that wasn't all. Just as Christianity arose as a protest against the Roman Empire, there were also protests within Islam. But where did the schism end? It was a series of specific events that set the course. The first Muslim conquests, between the 7th and 8th centuries, marked a key point. After Muhammad's death, the Islamic caliphs expanded rapidly, conquering Christian lands in the Middle East, North Africa, and parts of Europe. They created a political and cultural tension that marked Islam as a conquering religion against Christianity, which saw itself as the protector of Western civilization. The Crusades, which took place between the 11th and 13th centuries, were the response of Western Christianity to the expansion of Islam. These military campaigns, aimed at reclaiming the Holy Land from Muslim control, went beyond the religious. The conquest of this capital of the Byzantine Empire by the Ottoman Empire not only represented a strategic loss for Orthodox Christianity, but also symbolized the existential threat perceived by many Christians from Islam, further exacerbating tensions. Centuries later, European colonialism reversed the historical balance of power, subordinating Muslim nations to Christian powers, to the considerable detriment of the Islamic world. However, these tensions resurfaced in the 20th century with decolonization and the strengthening of religious movements on both sides, keeping alive a legacy of conflict and rivalry. For example, Saudi Arabia, the spiritual epicenter of Sunni Islam and the home of Wahhabism, has maintained strict religious segregation, forbidding the building of churches and restricting the public practice of religions other than Islam. So for a prince to enter a church could destroy his image, spark a rebellion, or, from the prince's side, start a war against Egypt that would cause immense chaos. Egypt is home to one of the oldest and most unique Christian communities in the world, the Copts. Christianity arrived in Egypt in the 1st century, traditionally attributed to Saint Mark, who founded the Coptic Orthodox Church. Over time, the Coptic Church has maintained a rich and distinctive tradition deeply connected to the roots of early Christianity. It is Christianity from the tree itself, whose ideological preservation has lasted for 1,000 years. Historically, the Copts have played an important role in the country's culture, art, and politics. But their presence has been marked by periods of peaceful coexistence with the Muslim majority and other periods of discrimination. The question is, which era are we in? A few years ago, Prince Mohammed bin Salman, MBS, decided to embark on a series of trips around the world as part of the political, economic, and social reforms driven by Saudi Arabia's Vision 2030, an ambitious agenda aimed at transforming the country both economically and socially, with a focus on improving personal freedoms and promoting a more open and modern image of the kingdom. One of his targets was Egypt, and the Coptic Church in particular. And there's a reason for that. It's not ideological, it's not destructive, it's not anarchistic. Prince MBS is seeking religious reconciliation, but more importantly, a diplomatic and image strategy to show that Saudi Arabia is willing to embrace religious pluralism and engage in interfaith dialogue. Or at least that's what we see on the surface. Certainly, Egypt and Saudi Arabia have historically been close, albeit with fluctuations depending on political and regional interests. In recent years, the two countries have shared a common focus on regional stability, particularly on issues of security, terrorism, and Iran's influence in the region. This visit is seen as a diplomatic strategy in response to accusations against the prince, such as the murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi and his handling of internal power. In fact, it could lead to more criticism of him than positive results. So what are his real intentions? His journey has never been solely about political situations, at least not in an extremely radical way, because when he crosses the threshold of the church, he's not just entering a symbolic situation in which Islam does something that no one would expect it to do. It's also the internal struggle that the prince faces with all his decisions and actions. When you're on top, it's much harder to think clearly. The bias of his religion also led him into critical situations, and when he entered the Al-Hadid Church in Cairo, it marked a profound change in his life. It's not just a diplomatic or symbolic act, it's an inner journey, a man in search of answers. His step across the threshold of the church is not just an act of respect for the Christian faith, it's a response to his own existential dilemmas. It's a moment of vulnerability in which MBS confronts his personal doubts about the meaning of his life and the internal tensions he's been dealing with privately, between the responsibilities of his leadership and his own personal challenges. Inside the church, MBS is confronted with a community that, despite religious differences, shares a common faith and lives in peace. Or at least that's how it appears. As someone immersed in this world, he was curious. By immersing himself in this environment of tradition and spirituality, MBS allows himself to let go of the rigidity of power in order to connect with something greater than himself. It's not the Crown Prince entering the church, but a man seeking connection and inner peace. In that space, surrounded by a congregation that does not know his identity, he faces his vulnerability and questions faith, humanity, and his own role in the world. And this is not an act he can repeat. It was a situation that blended in such a way that the prince could pay homage, marking a change in the ideologies carried by his religion and society, but without leaving his culture behind. He simply shared with other religions the peace that they profess and showed this openness that allowed him to pause briefly in his busy life and find a deeper meaning amidst the challenges of his position and any internal conflicts he might face. MBS's visit to the church is not only a symbolic reconciliation between religions, it's also a personal journey. It clearly helps him to transcend his role as the leader of Saudi Arabia, but also as an ordinary man seeking answers within himself. It's a way of showing that he's a human being and, in some way, helping to reconcile two divided religions on a global scale. In the end, the message is clear. Humanity and faith transcend political and religious barriers. All of us, regardless of our status or beliefs, are capable of finding common ground in our vulnerability. MBS's visit is something that, as we've said, may never be repeated, but it also helps us to understand that even an act of weakness can allow something that has been in chaos and division for many years to find balance and peace. The prince's journey began with a historical seed, accompanied by a political intention, and ended in a place that no one asked him to visit. No one expected or thought that he would visit the church, because at that time the Christian church in Egypt was very small and weak. But this is a better and more beautiful message because he did it out of his own humanity. Don't forget to subscribe and like it.